Britain is losing 8 pubs a week. And whilst it's proof of a failing economy, does it also represent the erasure of our country's history and traditions, with local authorities tearing down flags of the United Kingdom and a lack of support from the authorities for pubs? Is this another subtle assault on a way of life that we hold dear? Let's speak to the highly esteemed pub owner and restaurateur, Clinton Pugh. Hello, Clinton.
Hi, hello, Mark. Hello, everybody.
Lovely to have you on the show. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I just wonder whether the sort of liberal metropolitan elites that govern us and that control our public institutions and media don't think much of pubs, don't go to pubs, don't care about them, and maybe even are a little snooty about them and happy to see them go.
Well, I think you may be going a bit too far there, Mark, to be honest with you. I think there's many different factors that are causing the problem. I've never personally owned pubs, but I have owned bars and many restaurants over the years, designed and I developed them. At the moment have none anymore, because after Rachel Reeves announced her budget, I decided to dump my last restaurant in May, because I think it's now become virtually untenable for these businesses to operate. Now, obviously, my particular business was also stuck in a problem area because of LTNs that had caused horrendous problems for
low traffic neighbourhoods, these sort of basically ridiculous bollards that block the streets.
I had three units there and shops, and unfortunately it became untenable. Now, I could have traded it if we didn't have to have the increase in the national insurance contribution. You've got to realise that we're paying 20% VAT. There was periods of time where long periods of time we were paying collecting 17.5% VAT, and there have been periods of when we had 15% to help us get through and trade. It's a difficult industry. Don't forget, you've also got to realise that revenue on alcohol increased, was arranged to happen from around 2023. Now, that also caused a problem because, of course, you have to then, these prices get put onto the price of the bill, and then the increase of minimum wage. You've got to realise now, people of 21 years of age are on £25,400 a year, nearly, as a basic. And don't forget, if you're running restaurants and you do service charging, that also goes completely through the books now. So you add it all together, of course, it's becoming expensive for the customers to actually come. Now, well, also don't forget, people's attitudes to drinking changed. During COVID, a lot of people were probably drinking at home, and why not? Because you couldn't go out. Although there was a huge increase in turnover directly after we ended the COVID restrictions, the businesses, I think most businesses would obviously have done a lot better. But then you've also got to look into, Mark, the quantity of restaurants and sites. Lots of the retail sites which came vacant were actually taken over and turned into retail premises by the chains. Now, it got to the point where maybe a lot of our cities are they're just oversaturated with A3, which is pubs and restaurant sites. So there is going to be a fall and a decline. But unfortunately, the government's action and obviously the slow response of the Bank of England, I mean, the reality is to try and keep the interest high because of inflation, which has now been caused by our own government, by the increase in national insurance contribution, because obviously everyone has to try and pay the wages, which means they've got to put up the price.
And of course, the minimum wage going up as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's just compounds to the point where it's just not workable. A lot of little pubs, they struggle also to find staff. I mean, a lot of people do. And unfortunately, working in restaurants doesn't seem as fashionable as it was back in the 80s, 90s. And it's got to the point where it's become very, very difficult to employ the right kind of people to create the right kind of atmosphere. And if you then also look into the fact that it seems that 27% of the younger generation don't drink anymore, or a large percentage, something in the 20s, that's obviously going to have a knock-on effect. Although if you go to somewhere like Glasgow, which I visited recently because one of my daughters was on a course up there, they're still partying like it was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It might be something that's happening to the south. I don't think it's necessarily a deliberate action, but I do think our government, unfortunately, are not particularly the brightest of tickets, and they're certainly not getting out on the street to actually see what's going on. This is the trouble. You have the 20% VAT, the 15% national insurance contributions, the increased minimum wage, the inflation, and then the fact that the Bank of England held the interest rate so long, so high, all it's done is crippling the economy.
Well, it's devastating. And I think we know that the majority of people in hospitality are younger people. It's often their first job. It can be a stopgap at university or straight after when they graduate. So the national insurance contribution hike affected the hospitality industry particularly badly, and therefore young people. But just going back to my point, I'm just not sure that policymakers appreciate the cultural significance of the pub. And I also think that going to the pub is almost like a traditional working class pursuit. And I think that there are quite a few snooty people, in government and in the civil service who maybe just don't appreciate the significance of your local, and that when it goes, it's absolutely devastating. And Clinton, when it's gone, and it's not coming back.
I completely agree with you that it is very worrying, and I do feel that, probably with a lot of the restrictions of entering into cities and stuff, and also they're talking about increasing or decreasing the level of quantity of alcohol you can actually drink, which is obviously will have another restrict, because it means that everyone will not be. Now, that's not saying there's any. I mean, obviously we don't want people drinking and driving, as obvious, but at the same time, we don't want to get it to the point like it is now in Spain, where I think you can't even have half a beer. It's got to the point where it's virtually getting so low that people, it's. But of course, also we want people's safety. I mean, it's a very difficult one. But the attitude about the pubs, I mean, the pubs have obviously changed. I mean, the original, you will still find in London on certain corners and different places the classic boozer that people go to at 5 o'clock. Now, there will always be a few of those in cities, but of course they're decreasing. What we used to do in the old days when there was only BBC, ITV, people would have gone down the pub and played bar billiards and darts and Aunt Sally and interacted and sat there and chatted. And of course, when the introduction of the smoking ban, which is again you completely understand, but at the same time we could have had smoking rooms. So those are the people that did enjoy a cigarette with their beer, because the reality is not as if they're not taxed hugely enough as well to actually compensate for any extra costs they're going to be up to the NHS. Now, I'm not advocating saying that everyone should be allowed to smoke in pubs and stuff. They shouldn't. But I think all these things will be adding up too. And then you've also got pubs that play continuous sports on television or some other stuff that is a distraction away from what the traditional pub was. So if you want the traditional pub, we don't want the televisions, we don't want all sorts of things, that interfere with the actual atmosphere. If you wanted to go and read a book, you don't want it blaring in the background. So there are many, many factors in this changing world of what the pub is. But I agree, I'm completely worried, like you are, that if we lose traditional pubs completely, it would be a shame, because it's this one country in the world, or the whole of the Great Britain, that have had these amazing establishments, and it would be very sad if we lost them.
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot's done to protect theatres and old cinemas and, churches as well. We understand the importance of some of these historic buildings. Well, I think that pubs should have a similar status, and it's the saddest thing in the world, isn't it, to see a pub that becomes housing, and you have the original name of the pub, and you think, oh, I'll go and have a quick cold one in there, and it's someone's apartment. It's been split up into flats, and that's I think the most awful thing to see. Do they deserve some kind of protection within the tax system so they can survive?
Well, I think what the government should do is probably reduce the VAT to 15%. Obviously these are really difficult times for anyone trying to run restaurants and pubs. And if they reduce it down to 15% at least, that would make a large difference of actually being able to have some money at the end. Because at the moment, I felt back when I decided to lose my last restaurant, the Casbah, sell it cheaply to get rid of it, I felt that all I was being was a tax collector. There was nothing left. There's no cream left on the cake. In which case, why would you want to be an entrepreneur to invest? Now, if that particular site would have cost 450, 500,000 to develop in the way in which I did it, why would you want to take a risk if you're not going to make any money? This is the same thing that seems to be happening across all businesses. there doesn't seem to be the incentive and the reason to want to start the business, because there isn't any money left to make. And if the government goes and increases taxation again, all it's going to do is kill the economy even further. Do you remember when the interest rates were 15.5%, because we were all staying, I think it was the European monetary system or something similar.
Yeah,
to that.
ERM, that's right. Exchange rate mechanism.
Remember when John Major, there was posters on the side of the road saying, it's hurting, but it's working. Well, if you want to stop the baby crying, you don't strangle it, because of course you won't have a baby. It's the same with all these businesses. You can't just expect somehow that people like myself are going to carry on doing it just for the love.
No,
it's not tenable.
You're not mugs, and yet that's why we need entrepreneurs to be so crazy as to start a business, because upon that you have economic growth, which is national income, which pays for the doctors, the nurses, and all the rest of it. What a treat to have you on. The only problem is, Charlie, you've rather depressed me, and I feel I need a pint, but all the pubs are closed. Oh, sorry, Clinton. I feel like I need a pint now, but all the pubs are closed.
No, they're not. No, not
There's
yet.
a couple.
I'm sure you could find one in London, where I guess that's where you are.
Clinton, I don't know. I must have been on the source already. Sorry for getting your name wrong. Listen, it's been such a treat to have you on the show. And I do hope we get to speak again in the very near future.
I'm sure we will, Mark. All the best. But I do think that maybe that we do have a national treasure. We do need to get the support from the government. The government have to wake up. They've got to get out there and go and see what's going on. Just because they go out on a Friday, Saturday night and notice a place is busy, that doesn't mean to say it's making any money.
Not at all. We'll drink to that. Listen, Clinton Pugh, lovely to speak to you. Catch up soon. Clinton Pugh, restaurateur, former bar owner as well, with a rather depressing but consistent message, which is that if you tax people, it's subject to the law of diminishing returns.